Hello there, and welcome to Delightful Dissent. Today it's episode 21, and we're going to be talking to John Cremer about the assumption don't get caught without a plan. So, welcome to the show, John. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Matthew. My pleasure.
And I'm really I'm keen to get into this one because it feels like we kind of got a world obsessed with planning, perhaps even more so now when we hit some uncertainty. The response is like plan harder.
Yeah.
And that
Roadmap.
doesn't,
Where's the roadmap?
yeah, exactly. And that doesn't always seem to work very well. And certainly my experience is that in work and in school and in life in general, there's so much pressure to have a plan. And I think I've probably spent an awful lot of effort creating completely useless stuff that didn't help at all. And I think when working with how much we should have a plan is something that's really interesting. So if you're new to the show, Delightful Dissent is a show about questioning shoulds and challenging shoulds. It's really about exploring different ways of doing things and different approaches to hard problems. And I work with divergent pathfinders, people who are doing something a bit different, and to help them do good different. So that's really why I like to have this show. And often doing that work hits quite deep barriers and kind of hidden barriers, and they're often around the assumptions and the shoulds that we hold on to. And I really want to, this show's about challenging those so you can maybe look at things differently and deal with something that's been sticky or difficult for you for a while. And also really about just normalizing going out there and doing this, because I want everyone to be able to do this and to challenge the shoulds that are out there. So it's a chance to pick up some tips about how we do that and do it in a lighter, more fun way as well. That's why it's called Delightful Dissent. It's not about standing up there and saying like, you're wrong and I'm right. It's about exploring different ways and playing with it and having a bit of fun with it. This show is genuinely live. We might well touch on some challenging stuff or some slightly transgressive stuff. And there may be difficult topics. There may also be strong language. So just know that that's the case. It's also the possibility that we may have technical issues and stuff may go wrong. So please do bear with us if that happens. This show is really about engaging with the messy areas and the blurry lines and all of that stuff. So do ask questions yourself as you're watching the show. If you're watching live, do ask questions in the chat on YouTube. If you're asking later, we'll share contact details at the end. But really, it's about kind of questioning and engaging with it in your own way. I first met John actually just a few weeks ago. Really, I'm slightly surprised we hadn't met before, given the circles that we mix in. But I was really struck by this kind of really interesting perspective and very easy take on some stuff that people can find very, very difficult. And I really wanted to get him onto the show just to have a chat and have some fun. It just thought it would be an interesting thing to explore. So welcome to the show, John. And could you really, let us know a little bit about kind of who you are, the kind of work that you do, and the kind of people you like to work with, please?
The work that I do is based around improvisation, which most people, let's be honest, their response to that is, oh, yes, I've seen Whose Line Is It Anyway? Or they maybe have seen a live show. And improvisation is just exploding as an art form. So I've been working in that realm for quite some time, since the early 90s. And purely by really living the principles of improvisation, I found myself in front of a room full of chief executives and found that they were just as scared of me as I was of them, and really found this lovely interface between these anarchic skills and techniques and the world of business, the hierarchical, in many cases, straitjacketed realm of business, which, of course, is full of shoulds. And so these days, I spend my time working with people. Always say to me, "Who do you work with?" It's like a monstrous, huge, ridiculous range of organizations, anything from graduates that have chosen to spend their gap year in this country addressing social issues rather than going to another country and addressing social issues. So that year here is one organization I work with that specifies, specifically does that, to, your mega corp global multi-billion-pound corporations, and at all levels within those corporations, charities. And I've worked with one of my favourite groups to work with was a group of Christian street preachers in Luton. They were
Wow,
fantastic.
that
Yeah.
sounds
So,
incredible.
um, broad answer to a very specific
Yeah,
question there,
that's
Matthew.
great. Yeah, thank you. I think there's something really interesting for me. You know, my background is quite a lot of my background is actually in technology, and it's similarly quite a straight-jacketed world. And I've always been drawn to agile and those kind of ways of developing. And I think for me, improv is part of the reason this is exciting is because it's a set of skills and a set of skills might even be the wrong word, but that really help you kind of deal with this and engage with this uncertainty and engage with the with in the places where you don't have a plan or your plan turns out to be wrong. So, but before we get too much into this assumption, I do like to ask my guests to share a quote that kind of supports their position or kind of gives us a different perspective on everything. So, would you like to go ahead and share yours, please?
My favourite bumper sticker of all time is Jesus is coming, look busy. And for me, it just speaks on so many levels that we have had hierarchical, patriarchal religion on the sort of sitting over our culture in many ways, and the idea that you justify your existence, you could get caught, but if you look busy, it's so important to look busy and be busy. You're okay. You're off the hook. And to me, that really tied into the idea of don't get caught without a plan. It's almost as if someone's going to look over your shoulder and check up on your plan.
It makes me think of that thing where if you don't want to be bothered in organizations, you should spend your time carrying a clipboard and walking around purposefully. And you could spend your entire time like that and everyone will assume that you're doing the most amazing stuff, and you're doing the most important stuff and no one will question it.
I recently watched Better Call Saul, and Mike, the sort of very sinister bodyguard hitman type character, walked into a company doing just that. He just had a clipboard and a lab coat, and it gave him access to the complete every element, every area of this company, just by looking purposeful, making the occasional note. Yeah. Doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing.
Faking it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which does bring us really nicely to this assumption, I think, and this idea of don't get caught without a plan. And it definitely resonates for me. But what does it mean for you? What was it that made you kind of want to talk about this today?
It's the shame and discomfort I see so many people experience when they are heading into areas where not everything is known, as in, i.e., all of life. And there's this program that they were given in varying formats, but the program basically says you need a plan, you have to know what you're doing, and you have to be able to regurgitate information to be put on the spot and, justify your existence, basically. And I've seen so much stifled creativity, so many missed connections, so much anguish in that realm that it's a sort of secret mission of mine to deprogram the education system that is within all of us. And Matthew, it's funny you mentioned having a clipboard. I've got a friend and colleague called Steve Rowe, and he says that every one of us has a man with a clip, and it's very gender specific here. Every one of us somewhere has a man with a clipboard following us around, checking our work.
It kind of does feel like it is a man with a clipboard as well. There is something quite like it's like I when you say it, I can almost see that in my mind's eye, and they might even be wearing high vis as well.
High vis, and for mine would probably look like a cross between a High Court judge and Harold Shipman. It have that sort of grey, austere, saturnine demeanour to them,
Absolutely.
and their sole focus is to find out where you're lacking or missing.
Which boxes you have failed to tick. Yes.
Exactly. The chinks in your armour.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really does play into the stuff you were talking about this, this idea that there is this whole that planning that we can know that someone knows. I think this was also actually a theme of one of the shows a few weeks back was that we can really know anything, that anyone really knows what's going on, and it's we kind of almost co-construct these plans that are like, well, at least the plan knows what's going on. I was like, no, it doesn't, because we put it together.
Exactly. I mean, there's the classic. I mean, this has been misquoted, and it's one of those sort of internet memes by now. But it was either Mike Tyson that said everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, or General Patton that said everyone's got a great plan until the first bullet gets fired.
Yeah.
And it's that balance of structure and creativity. So can we have a structure that addresses what it is we're doing or about to do? And can we have the flexibility within that structure to creatively respond to what actually happens, which is really almost never what we predict will happen?
I think this gets to the heart of the fear, is that if we don't have a plan, then we can't prepare. And I think what preparation is and how we do that is actually a huge part of this, because on some level there's a shame in not being prepared.
Oh, I mean, the mission creep of the all boys grammar school that I went to showed up at its finest or its worst, depending on what end of it you were on, in what was euphemistically called preparation, which was their word for homework. And prep was you'd had to go home at the end of a day at school and do a bunch more of the shit they were teaching you at school. And the next day, there's no slack there. The next day you would be tested on it, or you would hand it in and it would be marked. And this sense of, have I done it right? I'm on my own at home, separated from my friends and peers, with my head pounding, trying to really, really express clearly the process of the formation of conurbations in the Ruhr Valley during the 1950s. Vital stuff that really every 14-year-old needs to be on top of, because this is.
It was definitely top of my list as a 14-year-old. I can tell you.
Absolutely, very little else consumed me at that point. I don't know, maybe the hormones, I don't know, but it obsessed me. Preparation. They called it prep. Prep for what? Preparation for what? Certainly not for real life, which is really messy.
It's fascinating, actually. I was literally in a conversation last night where we were talking about how most work in the real world is collaborative and is exploratory. You're not really doing something repeated and rote where there isn't a definite answer. And yet we spend a huge amount of our kind of time, certainly in education and actually in the workplace and in workplace training and development as well, pretending that we've got this answer and that there are clear answers and kind of doing prep, doing exactly that. I think it's a really strange idea, but yeah, I mean, so what could we do instead? What's the alternative here?
There's many alternatives. The one that I blundered into was improvisation, which is, from my perspective, is a set of techniques which, if delivered in a way that's sensitive and appropriate, gives people permission to be unprepared, to not do things perfectly or well, and to be okay with that. And that may sound really trite. And at the same time, for people I've worked with and for people I've witnessed other practitioners working with, it can be life-changing to recognize that the part of us that was stuck on the back burner and possibly marginalized, made fun of, whatever, is not only okay, but is actually a remarkable asset that can, as you say, Matthew, most good work, I wouldn't say most work, but most good or purposeful work is collaborative, exploratory, responsive to what is actually happening now rather than what we thought would happen when we made the plan. And there's nothing wrong with making plans. It's just they will, it will go askew. And then what do you do? What do you do when that happens? Can I draw you a diagram?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. I'm not much of a techie, so I know some people can have like slides hover across the screen as they're talking. No. So I'll draw a very simple diagram because keeping things simple is, to me, is really important. And I'll try and deal with this mirror image thing.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Getting there?
Yep.
There's you. There's a plan. Yeah, we all do this all the time. You and I planned to be here today. There's another arrow, which represents, what do you imagine that represents?
Is that what happens in reality?
This arrow represents reality. So you make a plan, and then reality happens. This mirror image thing is just doing my head in. There's a gap. There's a gap between the plan and the reality. What do we normally find in that gap? We didn't plan this, did we? I've sprung
for me,
this on
it's
them.
usually blind. It certainly used to be blind panic.
Panic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Panic. And the answer I generally get to this question is, and I mean, you've said it really, is one or other flavour of stress. It's unlikely that in that moment we go, ooh, wow, this is a surprise. How pleasant. Oh, I was hoping something would diverge. We aren't trained to do this. And what I've found again and again for myself and many, many other people is in that gap is also the potential for like magic, for creativity, for surprises, I'm so happy you used the word agility, because in order to flog improv in the corporate world, about 8 years ago, I had to say the word innovation every other sentence. Yeah. Nowadays, I can say the word agility at the beginning, and I'm totally cool. And if I want to really over-egg the put, agility, innovation, get that into a sentence, they're booking me.
Yeah. Buzzwords are one of the real things. I think they're one of the really interesting things in this space. Is again, it's like box ticking. It's a really interesting thing to apply. And then certainly my experience is so many organizations is like implementing a real agile organization is like fundamentally arranging everything differently, everyone thinking differently and working differently. And so many organizations, because you have to be agile, you have to be able to do, it's like have all of these kind of hollow rituals and the appearance of doing it, yet they're still doing all the planning underneath.
My favourite one, a colleague of mine worked with an organisation and delivered, as they do, a superb improvisation session, and everyone was sent out to brainstorm together and innovate. And as they were leaving the room, the CEO stood up and went, hold on, everyone, listen. Get out there, innovate, use the tools you've been given, but don't mess up. yeah, be creative, but don't make a mistake.
Yeah. It's so, I laugh because I kind of slightly pained laugh, I think, because I've experienced it so many times in big organizations.
Yeah. A friend of mine always said we laugh at the truth, and to me that's another element of improvising is initially people go into it with the sense that they there's like a new clipboard, and on the clipboard they have to be creative and funny, they have to be like a stand-up comic and I talked earlier about the feeling of welcoming, that an improvisation session, ideally is welcoming. It's like you're not going to be tested on how funny you are, comes as a tremendous relief to a lot of people. It's not about that. It's really fundamentally about being yourself things being a bit messy, and you're okay. It's okay.
As a core life skill, I think that's actually, I really, we this idea that we educate for very specific things, and we in workplace we train for very specific things, and then they don't come up, and we can't
Yeah.
transfer anything across. For me, I think there's something really powerful in developing these things that we can take with us whatever happens. And this ability to improvise and to work with what is rather than what we expected to find or what others expected to find, along with the ability to think critically, and to be able to kind of look at different perspectives, whatever those are. They're all, much more flexible skills that servicing any situation.
One of the fundamentals of improvisation, I only personally work with 3 techniques. And one of them is just, you'll find this in any improv class, I would hope, anywhere in the world at any time, is the idea of saying yes. And you mentioned different perspectives, Matthew. It's like I was working a lot in the States, and I ran into a lot of avid Trumpies, people who were like passionate about Donald Trump. I'm personally not. And because of improvisation, I could inquire, I could be open to them, I could accept them as human beings who happened to disagree with me politically, but not lose the humanity between the two of us. And it is that acceptance of where someone is. And if we inquire, if we can be bothered, we'll probably find out why they are that way. And not that we have to justify them being that way. We can simply look beyond the political or the religious or these labels that we end up stuck with that simply create pointless conflict.
Absolutely. I think that idea, for me, and one of the things with my work is obviously I work with people who are either self-identify or actually are kind of formally identified as divergent in some way, usually in terms of a hidden divergence, actually, rather than having I'm not sure whether a MAGA hat would count as as a hidden divergence or not, but
it would in Brighton.
It certainly would, yes. But that is a really, really big challenge, and the idea that it almost feels like the world has a plan for us. The society has this plan for us when we fit into certain categories. Like, you are one of those, and therefore you do that. And if you diverge from that, if you don't follow that for whatever reason, whether it's because that wasn't a very good plan for you, because it wasn't a very good plan in general, and all of those different things, it's actually very, very difficult. And you have to spend a lot of time justifying. It's like you can follow the plan, or you can justify yourself 100%, even though the plan doesn't work 100%. It's a really different thing. It's a really interesting thing. I've spent a lot of time actually in organizations advocating for different approaches, and it's like the level of scrutiny for different is much higher for the level of scrutiny for what we've always done or what the plan was already.
It's like there's the exit fee, isn't there? There's here's how we do it, and if you want to do it differently, you have to pay the exit fee, which is justification. And when I first got into the realm of improv, the idea of trying to sell, proper grown-up organizations on the value of something that looked silly, frivolous, and fun, heaven, how on earth can personal development be fun? That fun is what you do down the pub after a few drinks. Fun doesn't belong in the workplace. And to justify that, to have to really put the effort into building a case and justifying that. These days it's much, much easier because there's been a lot of studies around this, and there's things you can quote, like half the business schools in the US have improvisation on the curriculum, not as a frivolous after school activity, but actually as a set of recognizable life skills. That makes it easier to basically Um, I believe good improvisers are lazy, and I love it that I can now point to other people that justify my existence and my purpose. It's so much easier. Here's a link to an article in Harvard Business Review. Read that, all about what Yale College is doing, and
Yeah.
leave me alone, and let's get on with improvising.
Yeah, this idea of enlightened laziness is a huge thing. Interesting. I think my camera stopped working, so I'm going to see if I can come back. Oh,
Didn't plan that, did we?
no, we didn't plan that. That's interesting.
At
That's
least you froze. You've
yeah.
frozen. You look quite, quite GQ in your frozen image there. So I wouldn't worry about it personally.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, at least I wasn't pulling a daft expression for once.
Yeah, no,
So yeah,
no. I, Matthew, I'd stay with the Hugh Grant look. Just milk it for the rest.
yes. It looks like we are. Well, it does actually.
Oh, you're there.
No. Okay. I'm not going to participate in the stream for a while for technical reasons. Okay.
Well, Matthew, you did almost promise technical difficulties up
I
front.
did.
So
I did, and now they've manifested. So great. Yeah. Sorry for the divergence, everyone.
ironic.
Can't help but so we'll go with the circumstances as they are. And I think this is actually one of the really big things for me is that if you get too obsessed with the plan that you've lost, the kind of lost imaginary future, you do miss out on the opportunities that present themselves. Not only the fact that you don't get any of whatever, if you freeze or if you kind of reject it, you don't get any of what you'd expected. Worse, you kind of miss out on the new opportunities that are the different circumstance brings in. And that, I
Yes.
think, is actually one of the really perhaps the bigger loss almost.
Yes.
When you kind of have to stick to this,
Yes.
you have to stick to this plan, and you feel that if you take advantage of that, then you'll have to justify why you didn't do the thing that didn't work anymore anyway.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
an interesting position to be in.
I mean, in some arenas, improvising. Oh, I'm improvising. It's a dirty word. It's like, oh, you didn't prepare. You're blagging. You're faking it. You're just, pretending. And as you say, I mean, in a way, Matthew, you've talked about that diagram again, the gap between the plan and reality. If we freeze in that gap and do what many people do, which is almost take a mental crowbar and try and force reality back to our plan. I've seen people do this. I've seen people just be like, no, I've made the plan. The entire universe is going to stick to my plan. So the fact that it has diverged, I'm not accepting that. So I'm going to put all of this energy into, let's act as if the plan is still in place. Everyone conspire with me to do this, and everything's fine. Rather than
some people call that leadership.
They do, and well, it's the old command and control, hierarchical, left brain approach to doing things, and we are still. I don't think we're anywhere near out of that pattern yet, and I don't personally think that's going to happen any day soon.
I think we go in cycles culturally around this, and we're at a point where the left brain side is really deep into diminishing returns. And I want to be clear that when I say that, that this kind of mode of thinking, it's not actually about like completely renouncing that mode of thinking. It's about saying we can do something else as well, or we can do that and then we can do something else, and we can try them both, because it becomes equally and oppositely ridiculous if you renounce thinking and renounce evidence, and so it's an interesting one.
Well, I mean, in improv terms, Matthew, you're back to the idea of yes and the idea of saying, let's not, I mean, when I get on an aeroplane, I am really, really happy that the people that serviced that aeroplane after however many hours it was in the air are totally left brain, logical, methodical human beings, because that means I can fly safely. So I'm not going to throw that out the window and say, hey, you know what? Just if you're servicing an airplane, just do what you fancy.
Just wing it. Just yeah.
Just wing it, literally. And we're cool with that. If I'm going for surgery, I want, I want things to line up properly. You know, I don't want people to sort of show up in the theatre when they feel like it and bring along whatever tools they feel like trying out that day. I want it sorted.
Got this new one. I want to try it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look at this curved blade. That's it's that balance, isn't it? It's the saying yes to both. It's honouring and valuing both, because we wouldn't be where we are today without that left brain hierarchical approach, and we wouldn't be in the mess we are today without that approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that combination of that integration of, well, what was the plan? Why were we thinking that? What were we actually doing? What was the approach we were taking? And what is happening now? Is the challenge, isn't it? Is the essence of it? Because if I think about improv, and there's a story there, there's a narrative there, so there is some structure there. It's not that we're just kind of completely without what brought us to the moment and completely without an intent, a direction. It's just that it's a bit more flexible.
Yes. I have a friend and colleague called Michael Alosso, and his catchphrase, which I'm allowed to use because I'm his friend. No one else is allowed to use it. But his catchphrase is that structure frees creativity. And that the ideal structure creates a sense of support and safety and possibility, and has enough flexibility and space in it that the creative can emerge. The purpose of structure, in many realms, is for the creativity of human beings to emerge and be supported. When there's too much structure, it's just absolutely rigid and it's living death. And then when there's not enough structure, it's chaotic and things fall apart, and it doesn't work either way. It's finding that balance.
I think for me, there's a couple of really big questions that come up in that. The first one is really around, well, what do we do when structure that has served us stops?
That we could spend quite some time on that. My own opinion is that the education system that we have is at that place, and my approach would be to tear it completely to pieces and start again, rather than tinker with it, rather than set new targets, rather than do more of the same with a different branding. To actually just rip it to shreds, dismantle it and start again based on what we now know about what human beings need to learn to prepare themselves for the world and how they learn. Neither of which I believe is served by the education system we have. So when the structure doesn't serve us anymore, it takes the courage and the intentionality to really dismantle it. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point. And for me, there's a strong relationship between work and school. And they kind of co-create one another. They kind of both contribute to the way that the other one thinks, and what the other one does. And I think it's really interesting for me, thinking about your work, and actually my work as well, is in work rather than in primarily in kind of certainly in childhood education anyway. And I think there's something really, really interesting in there, and kind of developing these skills over a lifetime, and whether we develop when we bring this in, when we start letting people kind of set their own agenda and explore and do this. And it feels like we're starting to do this a little bit in some workplaces. We're starting to approach this, but actually we'd all be an awful lot better off if we could do it, if it was something that we'd always done. It was just something that we did, rather than it being this special thing that we do on Tuesday afternoons between
Yes.
like 3 and 5,
Yes. It's the
and
agility.
then
It's
we go back
agility
to the
time.
then we go back to the plan. Oh god,
Yeah.
that's a relief.
Well, I think COVID has accelerated some of these structural changes, and I found it very interesting to look at organisations that really focused on, okay, what kind of surveillance can we bring in to work from home to monitor every keystroke, where people's eyeballs are facing, how long they spend in the bathroom, that sort of, absurd industrialization of human beings. And other organizations that were like, oh, okay, this is how it is now. How do we make the most of this?
It's really interesting because one of what I've always kind of, you get this pressure around productivity in when you do any kind of management or anything. And as a manager, I realized I happened to manage a team of experts, and I had a set of I have a set of expertise, and they were experts in things I had no idea about. I have no idea what productive, good really looks like when they're doing it. I know what it looks like with me, but that's some of the time. The I couldn't kind of say, well, this is what your work looks like. So I have no idea when, they can be sat doing whatever they're doing, and I don't know whether that's a helpful thing for them, whether that's a helpful thing for what they're doing right now. I actually have to trust them, and I think that trust is a huge, huge part of this. And trusting that they're working with good intention, and that it might go wrong, but that their intentions were good as well.
Oh, you beat me to the word trust. It's such a. I mean, if you don't trust the people that are working for you, if you're an employer, why are they there? It's. My personal belief is that unless someone's, a sociopath, they want to have a positive impact upon the world. And if they're given, or if they can find themselves in an environment where that can happen, automatically you're going to trust them because you know what their intention is. And as you say, it may be that they make mistakes or things aren't as they could be, but they're going to rectify it. They're going to get on it rather than, hide it somewhere.
It feels very much like you were saying around the support again. It's like, what's the context? What's the system? What's the support that gives rise to what we want, to the kind of thing we want, rather than a specific thing. Rather than but it's a very interesting discipline, I think is probably the word, actually, or practice maybe, to actually get clear on what the kind of thing we want is. It's not a question we very often ask. It's like, what do we want out of this? It's like, I don't know. Well, why are you doing it then? And they're hard questions because we don't practice them very often.
This is true. Again, I just pick up these amazing anecdotes from people in the same realm. Another colleague of mine said he worked with an organisation, and he was getting a briefing from the CEO beforehand, and he was like, "Okay, so you're bringing me in. We're doing quite a bit of work with your team. What do you want? At the end of this." Well, I want them to be empowered. I want you to empower my people. I want my people to feel empowered. So it's all about empowerment. Empower them. And it basically was like, so to do what? Empower them to do what? And he said, well, to do what I tell them to do. So basically, what you're wanting to do is sort of turbocharge people. You're wanting to keep them on the same track, but have them do it faster.
The same, more. But more.
Yeah, I make them do the same but more because they're more enthusiastic than they are at this moment because they're sick of me telling them what to do. So again, instead of changing the structure, it's just like, how do we do more of the same?
And when this is one of these really interesting things, is I've certainly in my own personal life and actually in lots of the people I work with, a lot of the people I work with have at some point been accused or been characterized as being too sensitive. More sensitive to certain things. And I think this sensitivity to when reality is deviating from the plan is actually a really important thing, and it becomes one of the most important skills that we learn. What do we do when reality deviates from what we expect, and how soon can we react to that? Because quite often a quick response is a very easy response and a very cheap response, and a later response is exponentially harder and more expensive. And very often companies find that out by going
The
bankrupt.
hard way. For whatever reason, I've never questioned myself on this. I always go back to prehistoric humans. We've been in our current format for quite some time, at least a couple of 100,000 years. We've been in this vehicle with the same attributes and abilities and intelligence level, brain size, etc., etc., etc. Those quote unquote overly sensitive people prior to the Industrial Revolution and prior to sort of, the evolution of farming would have been highly valued in their whatever unit they lived in, an extended family or a clan or a tribe, whatever you want to call it, because they were intensely sensitive. They were the ones that would spot the bent blade of grass that would suggest that the prey they were hunting had turned that way instead of the way everyone thinks they had headed, and so on and so forth. Those people that tune into what is happening and are willing to express their discomfort when it's so much easier to just go, oh, that's fine, it'll be fine. Oh, there's always one, isn't there? Hey? Well,
Yeah, it's interesting, and there's a certain sort of sensitivity to actually, interestingly related to this kind of idea of planning, which I think of as prescience. We talk about senses as like five senses. There's no evidence for there's a, depending on how you measure it, there's about 25 odd, and a few more than that probably. But
yeah.
one of the big ones is a sense of prescience, the ability to kind of predict the future. And we think about the past, think of memory as this certain thing, which it isn't, and then the future is this completely unpredictable thing, which it isn't. We actually rely on relatively consistent kind of future prediction. And some people are just a bit more sensitive, particularly in these kind of complex and emergent spaces, to this than others. And they can very often be the people that point out that the plan is not really going to work, that this is the emperor's new clothes, that this is just hollow buzzwords.
Yeah.
And in many organizations, particularly the hierarchical authoritarian ones, they get punished, and so they learn to keep quiet.
Yeah.
And then so it's exactly what you say. I think it's a real problem for organizations to figure out how to value these people and to how to get the benefit of this, and to work with that.
Well, whenever I, on a micro scale, whenever I work, particularly for the first time with a group of people, whether they're random members of the public who've come to take an improv class, or whether it's a team within an organization, whatever the circumstances, if they're exposed for the first time, there are two messages I give, which is that there is a structure to what we're doing, that there are guidelines, and that the valuable places are going to be found where they don't follow the guidelines, and that we are here to celebrate the maverick. Once things start going and people start experiencing some elements of improv, usually sort of warm-up things, light-hearted things, group things that are playful, there will be someone who doesn't follow the guidelines. And for me, it's a really magical moment where, are we going to deliver on our promise? And are we going to, at some level, shame or marginalize that person? Or are we going to actually genuinely celebrate that here's the structure, as it were, the structure of this improv session. Here's the choice this person has made. And that is a creative choice, not a mistake or a shortcoming. And when we do that, it's almost as if the whole room goes, ah, and you can feel people go, wow, I've got permission to actually do what I choose around following the guidelines because they work. And also, if I fall off the tightrope, everyone's going to clap, not just be, oh, don't worry, we didn't see that, it's fine. Everyone's going to go, awesome, wow. And I'm continually amazed by what people come out with. And it is the mavericks that bring something really valuable to a situation. Again, structure frees creativity. You can't put the mavericks in charge and have them, steer the ship into a reef. You can listen to them.
It's interesting, and I noticed when I was looking at people who have kind of made a successful life out of being this kind of way, is that they very rarely or almost never become kind of leaders of existing organizations or of existing things, but they very often found them and then hand them over to someone else to run
That
once they. And that and I think we have again this idea of a leader, and what that is and how we do that and what we kind of aspire to is we're not trying to take that thing that we've already got and run it slightly differently, just like you said with education. We're actually trying to do something that's fundamentally and intrinsically different, and that means a whole different approach, and that's okay too. You can kind of take that step into the left hand path. You can follow that. Yeah.
it's interesting when you talked about the idea of leading a large organization. I just had an image flash across a flash of one of those Soviet posters of sort of the fist in the air, the workers massed behind, and we're going that way, kind of that vibe. And yeah, the mavericks, I think, if they cannot express themselves within an organization, they do found startups and doing the same sort of industry, but very different ways of doing things. And as you say, they tend to then hand them over, don't they? Because it's like, yeah, I've done that, I'm bored now.
Yeah, I definitely really, my work is all about the early stages of things, because the later stages of things not only in my interest, my skills aren't there either. I don't
Yeah.
actually, I don't have that, and those two things are very closely related. I just don't have great at giving things life at the early stage in the exploration. Later on, the kind of optimization of something that's already working well.
Yeah.
I'm so pleased other people are really good at that, because that's great, but that's not me.
Yeah. Well, when it's up and running, in a way, to one degree or another, you've helped to build a machine. That's it's running. It's got a structure to it. It's got a process. It's got a procedure, and of course, your interest is going to diminish.
I think once it's got a life of its own, that's actually the way I kind of see it. It's like,
Yeah.
because these things do, and I think that's part of the fear almost. Is like, if I create this thing, it's like Frankenstein's monster. It's like, it's the kind of give it life, and then it goes and destroys a village or something.
Has this happened? Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
So yeah, but I that's definitely the fear, and the kind of implicit fear I think of other people as well, that you'll create something, that you'll create something that's bad for them. That's a challenge for them. But if someone is really interested in exploring this, and they want to develop this themselves, I think there's improv classes, and there's actually a kind of more general class, I think, of working in this way, and people who can help you work in this way, and approaches to working in this way. But like, what is it that, if someone's looking for something like this, what should they look out for? What questions should they ask? What's a useful thing in this space? Because we've already talked about, not planning to how can you ask the right question so you can find the right place for you?
Okay, so we're talking to a viewer right now. So yeah. A viewer sitting there going, oh yeah, interested. If you are that viewer, there's plenty of improvisation classes. Nothing is more valuable than experience in this realm. So if you're like, oh, this is intriguing, or, oh, yeah, I remember doing that in college, but I haven't touched it since, check out an improv class. And if you find yourself checking out a class, then what I would look for in the early days is a sense of feeling welcomed, supported, and an environment where the maverick is celebrated genuinely. That you cannot make a mistake. That there is a security in the structure and the environment that's created, and there is the sense that you can experiment. You can fundamentally be yourself in that environment. And for me, being yourself in an environment means if you're improvising and your brain freezes and you go, that's great. If you go, I don't know what to say, that's your line, you know. So a sense of acceptance and just just give it a go, you know.
I think for me, what really resonates is that playfulness of that. You know, it's play because you can't play wrong, essentially.
No,
You know,
not really.
and which sort of makes it play. And also, there's an interesting thing in the word there is that there's play as in performance when we talk about kind of gameplay and performance things versus play. And they're separate in different languages. In Italian, they're two different words.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Gosh, I got to 10 to 2 before I learned something today. So that's great. I'm covered. I can go back to bed.
So and I think my experience is actually finding something that resonates for you as well within that space where you can feel that, you know, because there are different invitations, different framing that will work for some people and feel that way for some people and not feel that way for others. You know, we all approach things differently and different levels of comfort with different aspects as well. You know, there's more uncertainty, or there's more kind of structure, or there's more kind of doing stuff being witnessed, or there's more doing stuff small, and you know, there are all of these different kind of aspects to play with. And to some extent you can't know for sure, and you can't definitely, if you wait until you're certain, you'll never do it. But
No.
listening to that voice that's like, I like this one and I don't like that one, is also okay, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Try. Yeah. It's got to work for you. And as you say, some people are going to want to work with an instructor who's very meticulous, who's going to, you know, ironically, really prepare you and give you, you know, like a sort of padded jacket and training wheels on the bike and elbow pads and, you know, a sort of pulley system that means if you fall over, you won't even hit the ground, that whole realm. And then there's other instructors that are just more sort of relaxed, laissez-faire, easygoing. To me, yeah, of course, it has to work for you. And you're not wrong if you try something out and go, oh, that was too rigid, or, you know, take the Goldilocks approach, too rigid, too loose, too whatever.
I think that's a really big thing, is people feel a shame in trying something and then stopping it. And I've had so many hobbies and so many different kind of career paths and academic interests, and I definitely do actually still, despite that, I kind of still feel a little bit of shame around that. You know, like but like it's okay to walk away as well. And if it doesn't work for you when you try it out, I think that's a really, really big part of it.
Okay, viewer, Matthew has specifically given you permission to try something out and not continue. It's okay. And again, for me, that comes back to education. You haven't completed your homework. You signed up for a 6-week course. After week 3, you got a pounding headache every time you thought about going there. You weren't enjoying it. You didn't bond with the group or the instructor. Don't go. Go for a walk on the beach, you know.
Exactly.
Don't watch a film. Yeah. Permission. I have found that, you know, I spent a long time teaching improv, probably over 20 years, before I came to one single word which summarized it for me, which is that you're giving people permission to be themselves. And if someone is doing something well, it means they're repeating. Because, you know, if you're doing something well, you've probably done it before. If you're doing something ineptly, you really are improvising and expanding and learning. And if you have permission to be frustrated, angry, scared, whatever, while you're doing something different, then you have the opportunity to expand and to really not just step outside of that zone, but stay out there for a while. You know, I've seen people make remarkable shifts from applying these techniques. You know, many people have made massive shifts in their lives from doing this.
And obviously, I give guests a chance to share the stuff that they actually do as well. So, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the improv work that you do specifically?
Well, the training side of it, if you were interested, just look me up on LinkedIn. The performance side of it, and once we are back in the room and theatres open, I will be performing with my friends and colleagues, the Maydays, and we're pretty good. We do some very good improvised shows. We've been going for 17 years now.
Wow.
So, yeah, so we've been at it. So that's the Maydays, and
I think that's the right website, isn't it?
yeah, that's them.
Awesome.
That's us.
Cool. Brilliant. So,
check them out. Check me out on LinkedIn if you want to talk about the serious grown-up, work stuff. Happy to have a chat with you. And if you want to try it out for yourself, the Maydays offer classes online, so you can do it from the safety of your own home. So you can't lose.
I think that is actually one of the really nice things. There is an extra degree of safety in kind of dipping your toe in the water in doing stuff online. If it all goes wrong, you can just turn off the webcam.
Exactly.
you can literally just disappear yourself if that feels like the thing.
Yeah.
I really think one of the ways I like to try and sum these shows up is a should that people don't have to do anymore. Is what can people let go of? And I think like the need to see a plan through. You don't have to see a plan through if it's not working anymore. I think for me that's the should we let go of. So
I'm 100% with you on that, Matthew. We're all going to make plans because we're human, and if the plan's not working, if reality is more interesting, exciting, compelling, go with reality. Drop your plan. Yeah, you have permission. Are they going to get permission from both of us? Because that would be just like inescapable.
Yeah, double dose. Yeah,
double dose.
Yeah. So no, that's great. Thank you so much, John, for joining us today. I really enjoyed that the conversation, and I hope you did too, and I hope listeners out there have kind of got something quite. I feel quite light from this conversation, and I really like that. So yeah, thank you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on, and who knows, Matthew, maybe one day you and I will be improvising in the same room together. So
definitely, we'll definitely have to make that happen instead of just improvising a conversation on my live stream, on this live stream. So yeah, thank you very much everyone for watching. Really appreciate your engagement and your time. It really is your support and interest that makes this possible and makes it worth doing. Mostly, though I do just like having these conversations. The recordings are all available on the YouTube channel, so do check it out. And there's also a podcast available if you search Delightful Dissent on whatever your favourite podcast platform is. You can catch episodes. They're delayed a little bit, and you might need to briefly watch the video to see John's diagram from today, but that's fine. I really do hope this got you thinking. If it did, reach out and continue the conversation with me or with John or with anyone else who you think is really, it's not just us. Just go out and do something with it. There are some changes coming up over the next few weeks. I'm kind of playing with the format a little bit. So this will probably be the last one that looks exactly like this. There's also going to be some group conversations with previous guests, because we've lots of people are talking about quite similar emerging themes, and I want to get more of this discussion going on and kind of these brilliant ideas out there. So that's going to be coming up soon, so keep an eye out for that. There's also the new Divergent Pathfinders community that I'm playing with and setting up, so do reach out if you're interested in being a very early kind of beta participant, a kind of preview participant in that. The next episode, I'm going to be talking to Laurie Akhtar about we should have more empathy. So this will be a really interesting one to get into.
Ooh.
Empathy is such a big buzzword, and a tick box. It really is. Like, been empathetic, done, right? More empathy. So and my experience, and I think the experience of a lot of other people, is that actually too much, and it's not just more empathy makes it better and makes you more helpful. There are other ways to look at this. So that will be at 5 p.m. UK time, or a week today, so Thursday the 22nd of April. But yeah, so this is we'll be doing it a bit later because Laurie is based in the US, and we wouldn't want to make her get up at 4 in the morning to do it. So I hope to see you then. But in the meantime, do go out there and make some delightful dissent for yourself. Thanks very much, and goodbye.